The night he found her, the rain was falling sideways, the kind that feels sharp against the skin, as if the sky itself has decided to punish the earth. Marcus Hale almost didn't see the body at first. He was too focused on keeping his old pickup from skidding off the mountain road, too focused on the ache in his shoulders from a double shift and the quiet worry of whether his daughter had finished her homework before falling asleep. Then his headlights caught something unnatural at the edge of the ravine, a flash of dark blue against mud and leaves, and his foot slammed on the brake before his mind could argue him out of it. By the time the truck stopped, his heart was already pounding because some instincts never fade, no matter how tired a man becomes. He stepped out into the storm and realized with a sickening certainty that the shape in the dirt was a police officer, broken, bleeding, and barely breathing, and that whatever choices he made in the next few minutes would change his life forever. Before the story continues, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet courage of ordinary people doing the right thing when no one is watching. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. Marcus was a single father who lived his life in straight lines and narrow margins. He worked as a night maintenance supervisor at a textile warehouse, a job that paid just enough to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. His wife had died 5 years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving him with a 6-year-old daughter named Lily and a grief he learned to carry silently. The town knew him as dependable, quiet, and invisible. He fixed things that broke, showed up early, left late, and avoided trouble the way some men avoid fire. Trouble, however, has a way of finding people who never go looking for it. As he knelt in the mud beside the fallen officer, the rain soaking. Through his jacket, he saw the deep crimson spreading across her uniform and felt fear clamp around his chest. He had no medical training beyond a first aid course he barely remembered, but he knew enough to understand she was dying and that waiting for someone else to come along was not an option. Her face was pale beneath the grime, her eyes half open but unfocused, as if she were staring past him into something far away. A patrol car lay wrecked down the slope, twisted metal and shattered glass marking the path of a violent crash. Marcus checked for a pulse with trembling fingers and found it, faint and irregular, like a candle struggling in the wind. He pulled off his jacket and pressed it against her wound, fighting the urge to panic as blood soaked through the fabric. His hands shook, not from the cold but from the weight of responsibility crashing down on him. He thought of Lily asleep at home, trusting him to always come back, and he thought of how easily one wrong move could take that promise away. Still, he stayed. He stayed because leaving was not something he could live with, not now, not ever. The road was a dead zone for cell service, a fact Marcus knew too well. He dragged the officer, inch by painful inch, closer to his truck, his muscles burning and his breath coming in ragged gasps. Every few seconds he stopped to check her breathing, to whisper reassurance even though she could not respond, to beg the universe for a miracle he did not feel he deserved to ask for. When he finally got her into the passenger seat, he drove like a man possessed, hazards flashing, horn blaring, tires cutting through rain and darkness as he headed for the nearest hospital 30 miles away. He broke speed limits, ran empty intersections, and prayed he would not be pulled over, because explaining would cost time they did not have. All the while the officer's life pulsed beneath his hand, fragile and slipping, and Marcus realized that fear had given way to something stronger, something steadier, determination. By the time he reached the emergency entrance, his arms were numb and his clothes were soaked through with rain and blood. Nurses and doctors swarmed the vehicle, their faces tightening with urgency as they took over, shouting orders and rushing the officer through swinging doors. Marcus stood there in the fluorescent light, dripping onto the floor, suddenly unsure of what to do with his hands or his heart. He gave a brief, halting account to hospital staff, and then to a uniformed officer who arrived minutes later, his words tumbling over each other as adrenaline faded and exhaustion took its place. When they finally told him he could go home, he nodded and left, driving back through the storm with a silence heavier than any sound. The days that followed were a blur of routine and unease. Marcus returned to work, packed lunches, helped with spelling words, and pretended that life had not brushed against the edge of tragedy. But news travels fast in small towns, and it was not long before he learned the officer's name was Elena Ruiz, a respected patrol sergeant with a reputation for fairness and grit. The crash, the rumors said, had not been an accident. She had been chasing a suspect connected to a string of burglaries that may have involved someone inside the department. The whispers made Marcus uncomfortable, stirring a fear he could not quite name. He had simply done what any decent person would do, but the world had a way of turning simple acts into complicated consequences. A week later, 2 officers knocked on his door just as he was tucking Lily into bed. Their presence filled the small hallway, their expressions unreadable. Marcus felt his stomach drop, old instincts flaring, the kind that tell a man to brace for impact. They asked him questions about the night of the crash, about what he saw, about what he touched. He answered honestly, carefully, every word weighed and measured. When they left, thanking him for his cooperation, he stood in the doorway long after they were gone, listening to the quiet hum of the house and wondering if helping had somehow put a target on his back. Elena survived, but just barely. She spent weeks in a medically induced coma, her condition uncertain, her recovery doubtful. The police department hailed her as a hero, but behind closed doors, tensions simmered. Evidence from the crash began to point towards sabotage, and an internal investigation was launched. Marcus found himself pulled into it, asked to recount his actions again and again, his statements scrutinized for inconsistencies. To some, he was a good Samaritan. To others, an inconvenient witness. He felt small against the machinery of authority, a single dad with no connections, no power, and everything to lose. The strain began to show. Marcus lost hours at work attending interviews. His supervisor warned him gently about productivity. Lily sensed the change, growing quieter, more clingy, her small hands gripping his shirt as if afraid he might disappear. At night, Marcus lay awake replaying the scene on the road, wondering if he could have done more, if he had done something wrong. Doubt crept in like a slow poison, eroding the certainty that had carried him through that stormy night. Still, he refused to lie or bend the truth, even when it might have made his life easier. Integrity, he believed, was the last thing he had to give his daughter. Months passed before Elena finally woke. When she did, the department held its breath. Her memory was fragmented, her body weak, but her resolve remained intact. She asked about the man who found her, the one who would not leave her to die. When Marcus received the call asking if he would come to the station to meet her, his first instinct was to decline. He did not want attention or praise. He wanted normalcy. But something told him this meeting mattered, not just for him, but for the truth that still hovered unresolved. The station felt cold and imposing, a place where Marcus had always felt out of place. Elena was seated in a wheelchair, her uniform replaced by simple clothes, her face marked by scars that spoke of survival at a cost. She looked smaller than he remembered, but her eyes were sharp, searching. As she listened to his account, something shifted in her expression, recognition dawning not just of events, but of intention. She realized that without him, she would not be there, and that the truth he held was a missing piece in a puzzle far bigger than either of them. What happened next shocked the entire police force. Elena corroborated Marcus's testimony and added details from her own fractured memories, pointing investigators toward a fellow officer who had tampered with her vehicle to silence her. The revelation sent ripples through the department, exposing corruption that many had suspected but few had dared confront. Marcus's role transformed overnight. The quiet maintenance supervisor became a key witness, his integrity a linchpin in bringing down a network of betrayal. Officers who once eyed him with suspicion now looked at him with respect, some with shame. The trial was grueling. Marcus testified under oath, his voice steady even as his hands trembled. He spoke not as a hero but as a father, a man who did what he hoped someone would do for his own child. The verdict brought justice, but it did not erase the scars left behind. Elena continued her recovery, learning to walk again, learning to trust again. Marcus returned to his routines, though something fundamental had changed. He no longer felt invisible. He felt seen, not for what he owned or achieved, but for who he chose to be when it mattered most. Life did not suddenly become easy. Bills still piled up. Grief still visited unannounced. But there was a new thread woven into Marcus's days, a quiet pride that Lily sensed even if she did not fully understand. She told her classmates her dad was brave, and though he blushed and waved it off, her words settled into him like a promise fulfilled. Elena visited once, walking slowly but unaided, thanking him not with grand gestures, but with a simple acknowledgement of shared humanity. It was enough. As the story comes to a close, if this journey of courage, sacrifice, and quiet strength has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement keeps these stories alive and reminds others that compassion still matters in a world that often forgets it. Before the ending, leave a comment sharing whether you believe one act of kindness can truly change lives, because voices like yours shape the stories yet to be told. In the end, Marcus understood that heroism does not always wear a badge or make headlines. Sometimes it looks like a tired single dad stopping on a dark road in the rain, choosing to help when it would have been easier to drive on. And in that choice, a life was saved, a truth was uncovered, and a little girl learned what it means to stand for what is right. If this story moved you, let it remind you that even in the quietest moments, your actions can echo louder than you ever imagine.